What's the most embarrassing date you've been on? Fill the windows of the restaurant we're in, and there's this warm light everywhere. She smiles, looks coy, and asks me if I'm over my ex. I smile back, say that I am, and tell her that I'm already thinking of the person who I'd like to ask out next. She smiles even broader and asks me if she knows who it is, while touching me on the hand. Still smiling, I say, I don't think so. Her name is Rebecca and she was in one of my history classes. Distinctly, this was not the girl I was out to breakfast with. The girl I was with looked absolutely devastated. And I had no idea why. I think I said something like, I'm sad the semester's ending soon, but I'll see you in the spring. And thus ended what I would later learn was the first date with the woman who would later become my wife. So this is embarrassing in retrospect. Back in my second year of college, I was pulling an all-nighter at the same time as this very cute girl who I was friends with. We weren't in the same place, but we kept messaging over Facebook or Hangouts or what have you the entire night. It was really nice just talking with her. I had been single for about 2 months, and was just getting over the breakup. When dawn hit and our papers were finally done, she asked me out for celebratory breakfast. I went looking kinda gross. I absolutely looked like I had just finished an all-nighter. She looked radiant and had clearly put more work into this meeting than I did. As our breakfast went on, we're talking, laughing, and the caffeine is mixing with the satisfaction of completing my work for the semester, and I just feel like I'm in a really good place, and I tell her as much. The sun is starting to was at a house party. The girl whose house it was pulled me into her parents' bedroom. We were kissing and fumbling around like teens do on her parents' bed. Took her pants off and for some reason said something like, "Do you think your dad does this to your mum here?" The mood died pretty quick after that. Still cringe when I think about it. If you're reading this, I'm sorry, Catherine. It was and still is the most embarrassing moment of my life. First date with my now husband. We are both very anxious people who had little experience with dating, and we were both so nervous. I threw up right before the date. He came to pick me up and we drove to the library where we were planning to use their Wi-Fi to watch Netflix in the back of the car. Despite being almost 20 years old, my mom would not let us hang out in my bedroom at home. As soon as we got to the library, he got out of the car and threw up in the parking lot. I then admitted to him that I had also thrown up right before the date. He tried to play it off as us having the flu or food poisoning, but we both knew it was really just the nerves. I went with a girl to see a really late-night theater show. It ended at like 2 a.m., well past when public transit stopped running. We didn't have a car or money for a taxi, so we walked back to her family's house, since I lived much further away. We collapsed fully clothed on her bed and instantly fell asleep. 3 hours later her dad shook me awake and demanded to know who I was. Then when he found out I was studying chemistry in college, he started questioning me about thermodynamics, which was really not my strongest subject. Dude spent most of the night talking about his buddy Pedro and how he couldn't wait to introduce us. Turns out Pedro was his dick, and they were both pretty pissed that I wouldn't even shake hands with Pedro, never mind kiss him. BCU hurt his feelings by refusing to shake hands. It was one of those setups where my mom and his mom were friends, and they were like, our two nerdy, intensely introverted loner kids should date. Unfortunately, that was the literal entirety of what we had in common, so. Bonus detail, we went to a theater that was showing The Big Sleep. He fell asleep. In college I took a girl to an Almodovar movie. I heard this guy made some stuff girls like, so I went in blindly. It turned out to be a movie about a male nurse who was a serial rapist of hospital patients in a coma. That was a very awkward 2 hours, and ended with the girl telling me she will walk home alone. Well, when I was doing a lot of drugs, I took a girl to get discount cigarettes as a date. She did not smoke. I can only imagine the thoughts going through her head as she opened the door to my trash-ridden Jeep, and my cocaine-fueled smile said, "I thought it would be fun if you tagged along while I got cigarettes." Gotta say, after getting clean, that was not a shining moment. I invited my BF at the time over to watch movies in my basement. Instead, my grandmother sat in between us and we watched the game show channel. For 3 hours? And it wasn't even like she was trying to prevent us from doing stuff. She just wanted to hang out with us. Girl and I made plans to meet at an outdoor mall and see a movie. This was back in middle school, so my mom had to drive me in about an hour's worth of traffic, and she cancels 15 minutes out. I felt so bad for my mom driving me all the way there already, so I simply pretended like she hadn't cancelled. My mom dropped me off, and I watched a movie by myself. Almost cried, but I kept it together. But I mean, the movie was good at least. Not my embarrassment exactly, but I took a girl out after school one day. She was always a friend of mine, but I kinda liked her, too. Well, her recent ex saw her get in my truck. He called her while we were at a table waiting for our food. She put it on speaker, but he didn't know this. He immediately started demanding that he tell her where she is. When she wouldn't do that, he said he would tag her in a post on Facebook with all the nudes she ever sent him while they were dating, if she didn't go home. I felt so fucking bad for her. She was in tears the whole way home. The worst part was that nobody believed me because he is a nice dude. Shit still makes me sick to think about to this day. Some of my close friends at the time still hang out with the guy. I guess I was embarrassed too, tbh. Embarrassed to know this guy, that is. That's such a cute story. I have a similar one, not a date, but when I was in high school I wanted to get my mom some flowers. I got all the way to the store and bought some white roses before remembering that my only ride is a freaking motorcycle with nowhere to stash a bouquet. With the confidence that only a teenager could muster, I strapped the roses to the back of the motorcycle and sped off. When I started to see what looked like snow in my mirrors, I was a little baffled, but it disappeared soon enough. Obviously, by the time I got home there wasn't a single petal left on the roses. I gave my mom the bouquet of stems anyway, explaining what happened, and I swear she nearly died laughing at my stupidity. Anyway, I guess it really is the thought that counts. Second date, first time at his apartment. Toilet wouldn't flush. Normally I'd never go number 2 at someone's apartment, but I was a little drunk. Ended up having to wrap the piece of shit in toilet paper and put it in my purse. Ended up sleeping over, and the next morning the entire apartment stunk. He never found out, thankfully. He blamed his roommate for the smell. Bar to drown my sorrows. Somehow we've been together almost 10 years and married for 6. Love you, sweetheart. There was a girl that I had met through mutual friends, and we drifted in and out of each other's lives for a few years. I finally asked her out, and after a few dates, we had a lovely one at an outdoor cafe on a beautiful late summer evening. We went back to my place for the first time, and started kissing on my bed, which is when I felt something warm start to drip from my nose. It started bleeding and was dripping on her upper lip before I could catch it. I was horrified, and tried to wipe it off, which just smeared it, then ran to the bathroom to stuff a tissue in my nostril and get her a washcloth. She was as polite as she could be, but promptly informed me that she was leaving and wouldn't let me walk her to her car. As she walked out the front door, she turned and told me, "It's really too bad, because I was in a really good mood tonight." She was gone, and I headed to the I was 13 and it was my first date. She wanted to meet at some place and then go somewhere else, but I was pretty bad at knowing places, so I had to ask my mom where it was. She gave me a lift and I thought she'd go away, but she apparently went out to see what's happening. Not knowing I was being watched, I met her and we started walking when suddenly my mom yelled out from behind us that we were going in the wrong direction. I was so embarrassed I wasn't able to talk to the girl normally after and just went home very quickly because I thought the whole thing was already fucked. I thought it'd be cute to try ice skating as a first date, despite not knowing how to skate. I was unaware she was a competitive figure skater and literally skated circles around me. I knew it wasn't going anywhere when she asked if she could do a couple of laps without me. My beginner's pace was too slow. Organized a date with this gorgeous girl while I was at the surf club. Call for a rescue goes off and I'm running off to do my thing. Pull this older guy from the water, he is not in great shape, and has stopped breathing. CPR and the whole works. 10 minutes later and the ambos take him away. At the date she wanted to know if I was gay or bi, had to explain what CPR was, that I wasn't attracted to the person and that it's to try and save a life. Nope, she wasn't buying it. I was clearly gay for drowned men. We had a mediocre date, then walked to her apartment. On the way, she took a phone call about a couch she was buying. This call continues for the next few hours of the date. To entertain me, she put on a show on Netflix. This show is about a stalker, and is not really good first date material. At the end she said, resigned, "There isn't going to be a second date, is there?" And I agreed there would not be. I'm not gonna say date, but this coworker and I eventually dated. We would go walking after work at this big park and afterwards we'd go to a stop and go for bottled water. Well, it was a lottery night and the lot was full, so I had to park at least 10 or so parking spaces from the front doors. It's a chilly fall evening, so I get out with the car windows closed. I get the water and come out of the store and notice that she has both of the windows about halfway down. So I get in and it reeks of a horrendous smelling fart. She apologizes, but I just laugh my ass off and then she started to laugh too. We hung out a lot as co-workers, but that incident made me have a talk with her to start dating, and we did. When I was a teenager, there was this girl that I really liked. We started to hang out a lot more after we ended up in a class together. Around 2 months after the class started, she asks if I want to go get coffee sometime. I of course say yes, ecstatic that she asked me out. However, while we were on the date, she started saying stuff about how people always mistook her for a lesbian, saying how there is no way in hell she would ever go out with a girl. I was thrown off by this, because I thought that she, a girl, asked me, a girl, out on a date. I said that I thought that she asked me out, and she got really embarrassed, so now both of us are sitting in the middle of Starbucks on a sort of date that only one of us wanted to be on. When I was in high school, I dated a guy with IBS and my parents insisted multiple times on having him over for dinners where he would just sit there because he couldn't eat any of our food. It would have been fine if my parents ever let him and I cook food he could eat, which we always offered, or if people in my family fucking talked. We're a very introverted family and that's fine when it's just us, but when you're 17 and your boyfriend is bored and hungry and your family is just chewing in silence. Ugh, the cringe. 1991, finally asked out a really gorgeous coworker, she said yes. Take her to a party, and we rode with friends there. Once we're there she proceeds to get on her face, then spends the evening talking and flirting with another guy there that I didn't know. Evening ends and we ride with friends back to our vehicles, dude comes along too and they both make out with each other next to me in the back seat. My only revenge is that I told everyone at work how the date went. Shrugs. My best friend, before I met her, was set to meet up with a guy from Tinder. He was running late so she texted him, "Can I order us a pizza so it'll be ready?" And he said yes. She ordered and paid for it and when he got there they ate. The date wasn't perfect, but fine. After the meal, he went to pay, but she told him she already had and he lost his mind. He went off on her on how she should have told him, because he wouldn't have eaten the food if he knew a woman had paid for it. Turns out he was hella misogynistic and she ghosted him. A few months later I went on a date with the same guy and also ghosted him. And a few months after that I met my best friend. The day before everything locked down where I live I went on a date. We decided to eat at her place since it was risky and everything closes tomorrow. We meet and go for a walk, it goes weird but not terrible enough to scare me away. We get to her place and start making nachos, she then asks if it's okay to kiss me. We make out and it leads to sex. She pushes me off before I get to finish and just wants to spoon. Now I had just finished work and am hungry as fuck, my arm is trapped after the complimentary spoon. I let her know I'm hungry and would like to eat soon, it's like 7:30 and nachos are but a mere 10 feet away. Then I hear her snore, she full on passed out. Now an hour goes by and I have managed to free my poor arm, I awkwardly lay beside this woman I have known for 3 hours, 2 if you subtract the one she slept through, stomach grumbling for nachos and looking at my phone hoping. She wakes up soon so I can either eat the nachos or leave. She finally wakes up and then says she is in love with me. Hell, I've known myself for over 30 years and I can barely stand myself. She is clearly deranged. So I get up, put on my pants and leave. Nacoless. I had to go to fucking 7-Eleven for taquitos, no nachos with guac, salsa, sour cream and a delightful melange of nacho cheeses. I am not about to degrade myself with gas station nachos after this horrible sexual encounter. I am a man with standards, so jalapeno cream cheese and beef taco taquitos are the only choice. I had the worst sex of my life, over an hour staring at a ceiling with achy balls and ever-diminishing feeling in my arm and, worst of all, I didn't even get the nachos. No nachos? Not even one. No. Nacho. Nacoless. Not me but my wife. She was set up on a blind date by a friend several years before I met her. They agreed to meet at a mall and then go from there. This is late 90s, so neither of them have cell phones. So they talk briefly on the landline phone beforehand and he tells her he'll be wearing blue jeans and a Megadeth t-shirt. Okay, my wife doesn't listen to metal, but whatever. My wife tells him what she'll be wearing so they'll be able to identify each other. She arrived at the mall in the food court area, and waited for the dude. No sign of him. 10 minutes late. Then 20. 30 minutes. My wife is about to leave when a guy approaches her and asks if she's waiting for a date. It's the blind date guy, but he's wearing track pants and a Watchman smiley face t-shirt. My wife had seen him sitting in a booth nearby but ignored him because of what he was wearing. My wife asks why he told her he'd be wearing something different, and he just shrugs and says his mom hadn't washed that shirt yet so he switched. Okay. They decide to grab some food. Guy tries to use an expired coupon at New York Fries and starts an argument with the girl behind the counter. Once they sit down he asks my wife if she knows how to cook. What meals does she know how to cook? Can she make X? How does she make Y? Okay. Conversation keeps going and he basically adds, do you do it naked? After everything my wife says. I like to go rock climbing, do you do it naked? I like to grow my own veggies, do you do it naked? I like to volunteer at Habitat for Humanity, do you do it naked? Okay. My wife decides to end the date early and leave. Dude asks if she can lend him bus fare since his mom won't be coming to get him for several hours. He was 27 years old. My freshman year of college, I went on a first date with a guy from my Italian class. We had pizza and after dinner, we were walking around and it started to drizzle. I was wearing ballerina flats with no treads. I took a step on the wet cobblestones and my foot shot out from under me. I landed on my ass, hard. I was mortified of course, so I stood up quickly. My date asked if I was okay. I remember saying that I felt queasy. And the next thing I knew I was regaining consciousness in the gutter. A woman stopped to help. I eventually got up and finished my date at the student health center. It turned out I'd broken my tailbone. I had to sit on a donut cushion in class for the next 2 weeks. It didn't work out. It's too bad because breaking my ass on our first date would have made a great how we met story. I got catfished once. I have nothing against bigger people but this person used really good angles to make themselves look thin. When they showed up I didn't want to be rude so I stuck through it. She told me she got second in a pie eating contest that day. I only date winners. This one is a roller coaster of embarrassment then sadness. So I took a girl out to Nando's once on a date. She was really nice and we talked quite a lot, so I decided to treat her. On the drive there, the conversation was really awkward but it was our first time speaking so that was understandable. We ordered like normal, and I ate mine, but noticed she wasn't eating at all, and I asked why she wasn't eating anything, and she was like I don't feel like it, and proceeded to pour her entire meal into her handbag. I was a bit annoyed, but most of all felt massive second-hand embarrassment from her part. It was so weird. We then drove home in silence and all I could smell was the food that she had left in her handbag. Not even wrapped up. This is the sad part. She messages me 2 days later saying she was really sorry she was acting weird. Only 3 or 4 nights prior to the date was the Manchester Arena bombings, and she went. I had not even realized she had gone, so she was traumatized as fuck. Then I felt really bad for not asking about it, but TBF, I had no clue. We never spoke again after that. Poor girl. Edit, we had spoken over the phone prior to us meeting up, and on Snapchat and that, but we had never been face to face together with it being just us. We just did not click in person. Got diarrhea after our dinner. No TP in the stall. Used my late grandma's handkerchief. Or, my very first date when I was 13. I'd had a crush on him for over a year, I was so excited he said yes to my question of whether he wanted to go out with me. We went from our HS to a street with some shops. He was on his bike, made me walk. Cycled a bit too fast so I had to do some awkward speed walking. Never got off his bike the entire date. Pointed at a rack of CDs with classical music outside a record shop and jokingly said that he thought that Bach was so me. Next day a girl told me she had went on the exact same date with him, including the remark that Bach music was so her. Oh, and then a few days later he called me a fat pig in the hallways. Good times. The ear rapist, my GFs coined him that nickname. It's been 20+ years, and they still talk about that guy. Lol. First date and we went to a sports bar and then a movie, The Exorcist, the remastered, not the original. At the sports bar he was hanging all over me and wouldn't leave my side at all. I kept going to the bathroom to get some breathing room. Then we went to the movie, and he kept trying to stick his tongue in my ear. At point he screamed and jumped in my lap during a scary part of the movie. And then he went back to trying to stick his tongue in my ear. The only reason I didn't bail right away was he was my ride home. We were 20 miles from my home and I was a dumb 22-year-old. There was no second date. As soon as he dropped me off I ran to my front door and locked it. Steady guy. The mother's interrogation was probably only a minute or so, but it seemed to last an hour. I got off the phone and regretted everything I had said so much. I called back to apologize. When I saw the young lady in school the following week, I again tried to apologize. I gave her a rose. She freaked out and very loudly recounted the whole story, or her mom's version of it, to her friends and pretty much everyone else in earshot. Technically, there was never actually a date. Warning, severe cringe alert. Do not read this if you are easily triggered by gross disregard for modern standards of acceptable social behavior. In high school, circa 1983, I called a young lady to ask her out on a date, only to be told she had a boyfriend. And was away on a weekend ski trip with him at the time. I learned this from her mother. In the middle of introducing myself, during the phone call I made to the girl's home. I had looked the number up in a phone book, and cold called her house. Mom demanded to know who I was and why I was calling her daughter. I very candidly explained I wanted to go on a date, maybe dinner and a movie. I may have babbled incoherently for about 2 minutes before she informed me about the boyfriend and ski trip. It legitimately never occurred to me that anyone else could have had the brilliant idea to ask her out, let alone her having a. Next few hours I'd catch them spying on us from different locations. It was like being followed by a bunch of little sisters. We tried to make the date look as boring as possible so they would leave us alone. When we left and went to a bar we noticed the youngest girls left but the older ones still followed us to the next place, so again I'd notice one of them peeking at us from behind cover. So basically the entire night I thought we finally lost them. I'd lean in for a kiss or something but spit one of them peeking in on us. And we did plan on going to her place after, but those girls kept following us for 4 hours. We made a plan on splitting up and going in different directions and meet up after we lost them until we realized it was becoming too much effort and we didn't want to reward their persistence with something juicy to talk about, so we called it a night. So basically the fact. This wasn't particularly embarrassing, but we both made multiple errors. I was dating a ballet instructor. One place she taught at was next to a major transit hub, so we agreed to meet after her class. Apparently she was mentioning me to her class and I'm pretty sure she wanted her students to see us leave together, since she acted like she didn't want her students to see us together, yet did nothing to hide it. There were around 10 of them aged 12 to 17, as we were leaving, one of the younger girls shouted asking how much sex are we having tonight. And I yelled back until I can't anymore, so my date just glared at me saying don't encourage them. As we were walking to the restaurant/bar, we noticed 5 or 6 of them tagged along and were trying to hide any time we looked in their direction. We knew they were underage, so they couldn't get in, and figured we'd just wait them out. Nope. For the She kind of wanted them to see us leave together, and the fact I joked that we were having sex that night meant we were watched by a bunch of ballet students for an entire date. My George Costanza moment. Went out on a date with a girl going to college at a neighboring town. Went to dinner and what have you. When I went to take her back to her college apartment, we sat and chatted in my truck for a few minutes. Then she said, my roommate's gone, do you want to come up for coffee? My response was no, I don't like coffee. She gave me a strange look, we said our goodbyes and I left. I was halfway home when it hit me. I wish I could say I'm just going off the Seinfeld episode, but nope. Totally 87 is a big idiot when it comes to women. But met my now wife of 8 years the next month, so I say it worked out. Valentine's Day at college. My boyfriend walks into the library and finds me studying. He presents me with a bundle of flowers and the most horrible gift I've ever seen. Here's a pic. https://imager.com/gallery/orcavici. Well, I had apparently joked about it while we were at Target one day, and so he bought it for me as a joke. It didn't fit in my backpack, and so I had to carry it around my college classes for the rest of the day. Several teachers asked me about it, and I was mortified. Well, I still married him a little later, and we've been together 6 years, since getting married. Honestly, it grew on me enough that I still have it to this day. It's supposed to be a toddler body pillow, but it's just the right size for hugging while you sleep. He's asked if he can throw it away a few times, but I won't let him. I've actually tried to find the damn thing a few times online but haven't been successful. Even after using its barcode and factory info. I figure it's getting pretty gross and soon I should let it go. Said that it would be okay as friends, but I didn't think we'd work out for dating. She then started crying and stormed out. It was both the most baffling and embarrassing date I've ever been on. I met up with someone I met on Plenty of Fish. We met up at one of the nicer restaurants in town. She was 30 minutes late and came in like a bull through a china shop. Her lipstick was smeared all over her teeth. She threw herself into the chair, and without even saying hello, loudly started telling me about how she had been stretching a few nights before and has somehow ripped her vagina while doing it. Had to go to the ER. By this point literally everyone in the restaurant was quiet and staring at us. I was trying to talk really low, hoping she would unconsciously mimic me, but no go. She just kept talking about really personal stuff at max volume. She then mocked me when I said I was looking for a partner to be in a serious relationship with me. I took that as a pretty obvious sign we weren't looking for the same thing. So by the end of lunch, when she asked to meet up again, Petra, if you are out there somewhere, I am sorry. I was 12 years old when I had my first date. It was late 1980, long before cell phones were a thing. The girl had shown interest in me and I thought she had cool taste in music, so I was up for it. I took the bus to the military base she lived in. This was an Air Force base in Germany. I was walking to her house with plenty of time when I realized that I did not remember her exact apartment number. All of the buildings look exactly the same. I said hello to a lot of strange people that night after knocking on their door. By the time I found her I was really late and she was bummed out and I was totally panicked. We went to a dance where the boys I knew made terrible fun of me for having a date, something I did not react to well back then. Her friends were also being completely terrible. The night ended with her crying and me wanting to crawl into a hole and cover myself in dirt forever. Went on a Hinge date with this girl a couple years ago. It was either the second or third date and we went to a comedy show, should be pretty light-hearted, right? I picked her up and she was a little tipsy from day drinking with her friends. Well, we go to the comedy show and get seated in the first row. I don't recall who the comedian was, but he did a lot of crowd work. Well, about halfway through, I look over at my date and she is passed out. I'm talking mouth wide open, head back, breathing loudly. Cue the comedian ripping into me about waiting to roofie my date for about 5 minutes. By this point, my date wakes up and is with it for a minute or two, then falls asleep again. By this point I could tell the comedian would not let me live this down and everyone around me was laughing and giving me concerned looks. Finally the waitress comes up and pulls my date to the side. Giving me some excuse to get my date away from me, good on her for looking out, and asks her if she was safe. Thankfully we were new in our short relationship, because she told me after that if we were closer she would have pranked me or something. Didn't follow up on another date. Dodged a bullet there. TLDR took a date to a comedy show. She fell asleep while we were in the front row and I got hammered on by the comedian who made everyone at the show think I roofied her. It was all my fault. My first date with this girl, we went to a restaurant called Duck Duck Goose that promised duck and goose based tapas style dishes. We ordered duck meatballs and duck poutine. The duck meatballs had a sauce with it, which just ended up being duck grease. The poutine curds were also made of duck grease and disgusting. After eating just one of the 3 meatballs she confided in me that she hates duck. And that I also realized. I hated duck too. So anyway, then we got married. And now every time we talk about going somewhere new I'm always reminded that I make terrible decisions. Walk up to pay with my debit card. And nope, it's cash only and I don't have a cash. Had to go back and ask her if she had any cash. I was pretty darn embarrassed. This same thing happened to me on a first date, except we were just going to each buy our own dinner, then I had to ask him to pay for me. I was so embarrassed. It ended up well though, because we are getting married in a few months. Smile. A woman asked me on a date to a dog park bar. I told her my dogs don't travel well so it would just be me, which she said was fine. I got there and she also didn't bring her dog. Then she tells me she's a recovering alcoholic and doesn't drink. So we're at a dog park bar with no dogs and no drinking. The date lasted another 20 minutes or so before she began crying about how she'd ruined everything and ran to her car. Suddenly I was a guy at a dog bar with no dogs or drinks that just made a woman cry and run away. Finally asked her out after almost a full semester. We went to the beach. Picnic lunch. Drinks. We laid on the sand and stared into each other's eyes most of the day. Well, we both got horrible sunburn on half of our faces. She became violently ill everywhere. Married 33 years so far. Pro tip, drink more water, use sunscreen. When I first started dating my boyfriend, I was very shy and inexperienced. I had extreme anxiety and aversion to the possibility of physical intimacy to the point I would be physically sick to my stomach when I was around him. Even if there was no possibility of anything sex or intimate, I was so scared and anxious about it for some reason. One date we went to Texas Roadhouse. I ate a full meal, even though I was feeling the sensation of nausea and anxiety creep up on me. I could barely keep my food down when we left the restaurant. As we walked to his car, I puked all over the ground and on his sweater in the parking lot. He brushed it off and took me home. We're engaged now and he still likes to bring up that story 8 years later lol. And I did get over my anxiety and aversion to physical intimacy/sex. Fascinating that he was offended that you were looking out for your safety and then yet still couldn't manage his emotions and got angry over something trivial. You'd think he'd be on his best behavior to try to show you he was safe. He should be embarrassed, not you. No, for a one-time kind of thing, I said no. She almost started crying. I jumped in my vehicle and hauled ass. I haven't been back to that restaurant since. Doesn't go out very often and likes to dress up when she does. She was wearing some very high heels, but she definitely wasn't comfortable in them. She almost fell a couple of times before we get into the restaurant. So I feel like she's trying too hard to make it look like a first date, but what the hell, I'm a nice guy. We went in, sat down to order a drink and dinner, and about 10 minutes later a couple of her friends just happened to show up to the same restaurant, saw her there and came over and was all like, "So is this your date? Oh, y'all are going to have so much fun tonight. Do you have any cute friends you can hook us up with tonight? What are y'all doing after dinner?" It was all too much for me. We ate and I told her I appreciated her meeting me for dinner, but I didn't feel like we were hitting it off. She asked if she could come by my place. I chatted up a chick on POF once. She had an okay pic, but it was kind of out of focus and didn't really show anything, but what the fuck, I'm on POF and might as well say hi. We messaged back and forth a few times and she offered to send me some more pics to my email but didn't want to post them on POF. Sure, I gave her my email ID and she sent 3 or 4. She was cute, not gorgeous, just a little on the thick side, but the curves were in the right place and she was asking me to meet up versus waiting around for me to do the asking. She wanted to meet up at a particular restaurant for a dinner date. I got there a little early, she showed up just a few minutes after I did. I recognized her car from the description she gave me. She got out and was a good 50 pounds over what I would have estimated from the photos. She is wearing what I would call a prom dress. She explained it that she It was like our 4th or 5th date. We went out to dinner, drinks, etc. She invites me to spend the night. I know we are hooking up. My stomach starts feeling not so well. I excuse myself to the bathroom. I then proceeded to shit and vomit for the next 6 hours non-stop. I had food poisoning. I was super embarrassed, but she was completely understanding. Even tried to help me. This was years ago, and to this day she is still the love of my life. Forced double date scenario, where the boy my then BFF was dating absolutely couldn't go on any dates without his BFF, so I had to be dragged along. The friend asks me out and I told him no, and he spent the rest of the time aggressively yelling at me things like, "I can't believe you said no and I can't believe you don't want to date me." Had to sit through a whole movie this way. Plus side is that I was never forced to go on these stupid dates again. I spent the whole time cringing and happy about huge bullet dodged. Unfortunately, I drove with my friend to the theater. Had it happened in today's day and age, I would have gotten a Lyft/Uber out of there. Wish I wasn't under so much stress that I couldn't remember taxis were a thing. I was on a first date with a girl and it was going really well. We'd only met the day before but we were vibing and I was pretty confident and optimistic. We were sitting near the front of the bar and in eyeshot of basically everyone there at a small circular table. Then she asked if I could pass the water. Me, feeling kind of tipsy and cocky, decided it would be funny to hold it over her head, trying to be funny pretending to drop it on her head. And then my hand slipped, and I actually did pour the whole jug of water on her head. In front of the whole bar. Pretty sure she understood it was an accident, but by that point the damage was done, and there were several tables of people laughing at us. Needless to say, that was the last time I saw her. Matched with a dude in Bumble. Guy seemed sweet, so we went for a long walk and talked. Dude ends up talking for far too long about aliens making the world according to the book of Genesis, and the earth being flat very loudly in the coffee shop. And all of the proof thereof. Deadass sounded like the History Channel at 2 a.m. I tried to be as polite as possible but he was ridiculous. I am not sure if I was embarrassed more for me or for him. Trailer packed with people I didn't know. The only seating was a single couch, and there was a random as strobe light in one room. Everyone was just sitting on the floor. He immediately left and got a drink, so I'm like, "Aight, guess I'll be the DD." He didn't introduce me to anyone. Everyone kept asking why I was drinking water and if I wanted a drink, which I desperately needed at this point but turned down. He was nearly impossible to find for most of the party except for the last 10 minutes where I sat on his lap and we made out. He was an awful kisser. By then, it was late, I was uncomfortable, still nauseous, and a good 45-minute drive from home. I asked to leave several times before I finally dragged him out and drove his drunk ass home. There wasn't a second date. I was around 17 or 18. There was this guy at my church that I wasn't super interested in, but my parents really wanted us to at least give it a go because they thought he was a good guy. He was funny and traditionally attractive, I just wasn't personally attracted to him. So when he asked me out on a date one day, I'm like, "Hey, sure, what's the worst that could happen?" Well, he took me to Penn Station. A casual sub-chain, for those that don't know. I'm not a stickler about going to expensive restaurants or doing anything fancy for dates, but a sandwich chain with a drive-through. My food was horrible. I couldn't finish it and was nauseous the rest of the night. I still can't bring myself to eat there, so after that he's like, "I have a friend throwing a party, want to go?" And I'm like, hell yeah, that's more my speed. Church boy is getting crazy. We walk into this tiny, dirty. My girlfriend and I went on a picnic/fishing trip. Everything was out on or near a blanket layout on the grass not far from a river where we were earlier. Then it started to rain. Not a sprinkle, a good hard rain. So quickly we started packing things up, throwing everything together to carry over and put in the car. Once everything was in the trunk, I slammed it shut. The very instant I heard it click, I was struck with the thought that inside the tackle box was the car keys, where I had put them so that I could be a bit more comfortable for our picnic. It was still raining, hard. We had no cell phone. The closest phone was about a mile away, in someone's farmhouse. The only other keys were 30 miles away, in the possession of her dad. So we started walking that mile. I will let you figure out the rest.